We want to welcome you all back to Strasbourg. I'm sure you're all really excited and can't wait to hear what we have to say. We're reporting twice this month because this Parliament has brought us back here to this place twice, even though we have got the same facilities in Brussels and we should be doing this work there. But that said, I want to give you some information about a resolution that I am putting through on a European Structural and Investment Fund. As everyone maybe would realise, there are lots of groups and organisations across Ireland that would get access to those funds, and they do sterling work. However, there's a report going through on sound economic governance, and basically it is allowing microeconomic conditionality to affect how funding is allocated. So if countries do not comply with austerity, with cuts, their funding programmes will be suspended. So I have put through an alternative resolution, and that is going to be voted on today. We want to thank you all for your thousands of emails on net neutrality. We will be voting, Sinn Féin will be voting to ensure that there is net neutrality, and Matt is going to give you some more information about that. For those of you that may not have heard about it, you're few and far between when we consider the mountain of emails that we have gotten. The situation in Palestine is deteriorating. There have been 1,000 Palestinians arrested this month alone, almost 200 children among them. And the international community seems to be just standing by and observing as Israel is operating its policies of settlement and demolition, apartheid regime and shoot-to-kill policy. And it is doing so on the backdrop of having closed access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque for the Palestinians. And basically what we and others who are very concerned about this situation and who are eager and anxious to do something about it know is that Israel is trying to divert its attention away from what it is doing in breaching of international humanitarian law, and it is trying to turn this into a religious conflict. Much more to try to tell you about what we've been doing over the last number of weeks, but time does not permit us. So I'm going to hand you over to Lynn and she'll give you an update.
Thanks, Martina. I suppose the number of things that I wanted to talk about during this session, we've two big files coming up for a vote in the Parliament. One on the authorisation of GM food and feed and allowing member states to opt out. It's a very flawed piece of work, and Jean-Claude Juncker, when he was this candidate for presidency of the Commission, promised that he was going to democratise the process at which GM food and feed would come into the European Union. Instead, what he's done now that he is the president, he's gone completely back on that and has presented a very legally dubious document. So we'll be voting against that today, and we're sending them back to the drawing board on this because it leaves member states wide open for legal challenges if they try to use this legal mechanism. The other document that's coming for vote is novel foods. I have a lot of concerns around nanotechnology, and it's a very new process. It may have benefits, but what we believe is that the science needs to be backed behind it. It needs to be proven to be safe, and we don't believe that the current process allows for that. So they're the two documents we'll be voting on in this session. Most of the time I wanted just to talk about Ibrahim Halawa and give people an update. We had a delegation to Brussels last week. We brought Peter Greste's lawyer from Australia over. We had Mohammed Sultan, who's previously on hunger strike in an Egyptian prison, speak about his experience in there. And we had another series of high-level lawyers. Mohammed Fahmi's lawyer was also present. And what we want to do is to have them feed in their opinion as to what can be done for Ibrahim Halawa. And it was very interesting that certainly everyone was unanimous that it needs a very vocal campaign by the Irish government, that the Irish government are misinterpreting the presidential decree, and that it can be used for Ibrahim before sentencing. And in actual fact, what they're saying is that it would be more beneficial before he is sentenced, because Ibrahim faces the death sentence if found guilty. And if that is the case, then the presidential decree will not apply for him, because that sentence could not be carried out in his home country of Ireland, because we don't have the death sentence. So what we're doing is appealing to the Irish government to sit down, talk to these legal experts and be prepared to admit that they may have got it wrong on this and that there is an alternative there for getting Ibrahim home. I'm now going to hand you over to Liadh Níriada.
Gurmagat Lynn, Fáteróibh, Arashan Saharis and Darúr, Misha Hardgail. We had a very good Fisheries conference in Dungarvan just this past weekend. A lot of issues came up and it was a great opportunity for me to hear on the ground what the issues are for the fishermen. As always, they are really strangled by so many rules and regulations, and in one sense for me it dictated, I suppose, the work programme that I have ahead of me to try and accommodate them as best as I can. For instance, we need to start looking at socio-economic impact of the landing obligation. We need to start looking at putting social insurances in place for those who are most at risk out at sea. We need to start looking at the quotas for sure, and we need to start looking at scientific data and how that can be improved and how we can get more independent research done, because the scientific data that we do get doesn't necessarily correlate with what the fishermen on the ground are saying. So it's a question of joining up the dots there, because fishermen by their very nature are the first environmentalists. They know exactly what's happening on the ground. So really it was a very productive meeting, and I hope that we'll have lots to follow up on after that. Mariana Shin is a hearing on languages, and really what we want to do there is introduce a European directive on language rights, because mar hampla an achtír na tíre beagach go háirithe tá annachid de máiste áigeanmh do daoine go leor na hanga féin a hanga dúchas. Mar sin Marian le Ellen tá mise an hearing seo a bheith going chun aigehúirtar sin to see how can we actually improve language rights for people, because really some people get beaten up, tortured, all kinds of horrendous things in other countries. Ní sé just savale sé se an tarú a nacháid, so sé har a tácht go dú mi seiger sin. The other thing that's happening this week, of course, is budgets. Where would I be in Strasbourg without budgets? So we're going to have a lot of votes on budgets, and we're going to have a look at the draft budget as well. And we still have a huge problem in terms of debts that haven't been paid from the 2007 to 2013 MFF. I constantly am calling for a revision of the MFF, because what they're doing is robbing money from this current term to pay off last term's budget deficits. And that's a huge issue, because now it's going to affect all kinds of programmes that haven't been implemented because the money isn't there. So sin canas ar dhíga méimiid úr taigar an seachtain seo, agus sin mo chuid agus raiglinn go dtí meas.
Liadh, Martina mentioned that we've been getting thousands of email lobbies regarding the net neutrality votes that are coming before plenary this session, and it's great to see citizens being so engaged in the process of what is happening here. Of course, many people will know that this is basically a prospect that's been put forward by the Commission that will allow a two-tier internet system to develop, whereby large corporate interests would have a greater say in terms of how the internet is managed and facilitated than no ordinary citizens. Completely unacceptable. And what's even more unacceptable is the Parliament has already set out its position very clear in a very progressive way, and I would argue in line with the vast majority of the citizens of Europe. Unfortunately, this entire debacle shows very cynically the huge power and influence that corporate interests have in the negotiating process. Sinn Féin, as Martina have said, will be supporting those positive amendments. We have co-signed many of them ourselves, and we will be urging other MEPs to do the same. And on top of that, we will be urging and encouraging the Irish government to get behind our own citizens and ensure that this very destructive piece of legislation isn't allowed to go through, and also trying to disentangle what was a very I suppose clever at one stage use of the legislation by putting this piece of legislation alongside the data roaming legislation. So you have a very positive piece of work put alongside something that's going to be very negative, and we're not going to tolerate that, and we're going to be pushing it through. Also, many of you will be aware of the very dangerous situation in Portugal, whereby the democratically elected majority members of Parliament have up until this point been refused authority by the President to form a government. We're going to receive later on today a briefing from two of the three parties that will form part of that coalition, we hope, the Left Bloco and the PCP, and we're going to hear first hand from them not only what the current situation is, but what we can do as fellow left party representatives at a European level to try and ensure that pressure is put not only on the Portuguese President but also on the European Commission, who many people suspect have a hand to play in all of this. And it's very interesting that one of the three parties, the other party, is a sister party of the Irish Labour Party. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Irish Labour Party will join with us and other progressive voices across Europe in demanding that the voice of the Portuguese people is heard. Finally, I just want to flag up a very important conference from my point of view that I'm hosting in Donegal, in Milford, County Donegal, on Friday the 6th of November. It's entitled Farming in Peripheral Areas. It's going to deal with many of the challenges facing those farmers who are dealing with life and managing a farm in the most peripheral communities, not only of Ireland but across Europe. But also, very importantly, look at how we can use rural development plans and how we can use the CAP process and how we can use government policies to support the development of rural communities in those most marginalised areas of Ireland and of Europe. We're going to have international as well as Irish speakers, representatives of all the main farming organisations, as well as Minister Michelle O'Neill, who will be delivering an address. And I would encourage people, whether you're involved directly or not in farming, to attend the conference and to tie in. We'll be putting details of that up on my Facebook and Twitter account, as well as on the Sinn Féin pages over the next number of days. So we'd encourage as many people as possible to attend and engage with that conference.
This is one of the ways that we Sinn Féin MEPs make ourselves accountable to you, the people who elected us here. So get your friends to give 10 minutes of their valuable time to try to listen to what we're saying, give us some feedback, let us know if we are doing the job right and what you think about the work that we're involved in. Till next time, slán go fóill.